Okay, you guys, so tonight's homework's super short. It's on body paragraphs and conclusions, and some of the information might seem a little bit repeated from when we talked about the body sentences and concluding sentences in paragraphs. So one of the reasons, again, that we teach paragraph first before we do essay, simply because a lot of the components of a paragraph are just expanded upon and drawn out in an essay, but it's the same stuff. So basically, you're going to learn about the components of body paragraphs using transitions and also the concluding paragraph. So, body paragraphs in an essay. You need to set the stage for the body paragraphs in your introductory paragraph. So you need to clearly and in order tell the reader what will be in your essay in the intro. That's the #1 rule of creating your body paragraphs in an essay. And you need to follow that plan as you write. So in our example paragraph that we did in yesterday's homework talking about holidays, you should have clearly said, I'm going to talk about Christmas, I'm going to talk about Valentine's Day, and I'm going to talk about Halloween. And then as you wrote your actual essay, of course you didn't do that, you just did the intro. But if you were writing out the full essay, you would have need to have included body paragraph 1 would have been on Christmas, body paragraph 2 on Valentine's Day, and body paragraph 3 on Halloween, because that is the way that you introduce them in the essay. So you have to be very careful about how you introduce it, because that's the plan you have to follow in the actual essay itself. Next idea on body paragraphs is the first sentence of each body paragraph makes it clear to the reader what that paragraph is going to be about, the main idea of that paragraph, a topic sentence, if you will. And then the rest of the sentences in the body tell more about that particular topic, or they prove the main idea. In this instance, we're talking mostly about expository or explanatory essays, and in that case, you're going to tell me more or explain on the topic, whereas proving the main idea is going to be mostly argumentative or persuasive writing. So those sentences will explain, discuss, or elaborate that main idea. And again, you're writing this in your own notebook paper unless we decided as a class to go back to a packet. All right, so in transitions, just like in standalone summaries or in the paragraphs that we talked about, they help keep your reader on track. They definitely signal a switch from one main idea to another. And the longer a piece of writing, the more important transitions become. And you can use transitions in a number of ways. First, you're probably going to start using them just transition words, but then maybe you might start moving those words around, those transition words around in the sentence, or you might even start creating whole sentences that are a transition sentence, like full bridge to the next idea. Please remember to avoid first, second, or third. Or first, I'm going to talk about this. Secondly, I'm going to talk about this. And then third and finally, I'm going to talk about this. Try to avoid those as transition words from here on out. They're very elementary. They're like 4th grade style or something, and you can do better than that at this point. Tips on transitions: really try hard to use a variety. I am going to give you a printout of transition words to glue into your journal, but as we've seen in other pieces, I believe a couple weeks ago I showed you a paragraph where it said that the president had many responsibilities. One of those was diplomatic relations, commander-in-chief of the army. They used the word responsibility over and over and over again, and that was actually your transition word. And a lot of you got that wrong in your WISC. A lot of you thought it was the word the, when in actuality they were using the word responsibilities, which isn't necessarily a word you would think of to use as a transition, but really anything used repetitively in that manner could be considered a transition, moving you into the next idea. So there's lots of different ways to use transitions, so think variety. And like I said previously, if you could try to start rearranging those words within that first sentence so it isn't at the beginning every time, that's going to elevate your writing as well. Okay, so expanding your body paragraph. The sentences that are explaining or discussing or telling more or proving something tell the reader more information and prove and expand on your main ideas and content. And it helps keep the writing from being super boring and list-like, and gives the reader more specific information on what your main idea is. And you can elaborate your ideas by coming up with interesting, different, unusual, not so obvious, in fact specific things written in your own voice that are maybe new and original ideas. And that will really help broaden the reader's mind and help avoid the boring writing. Okay, so as far as the concluding paragraph is concerned, you should try to restate the thesis from your intro and give a summary of some of the highlights of, not necessarily the article, the essay. I should probably change that. But it should also sometimes even finish with a sentence that really leaves your reader thinking about what you covered in your essay. You should be using a lot of the same keywords from your intro in your conclusion. And so to show you that, I wanted to show you an example intro and how the conclusion really mimics what is happening in the intro. Basically, I always tell my students, once you have the intro written, you're golden. Just copy it down and switch it around a little bit and redo it for your conclusion. So your intro and your conclusion should be very similar. So here's an example intro. Research might not be the most fun, super sleuthing activity. However, when teenagers are learning to do research, they need to master several skills. Throughout your educational career, you will be asked to do several research essays. Students need to find appropriate sources, take notes that will be meaningful and useful, and organize their notes to plan a well-written paper. This first piece here, researching might not be the most fun or super sleuthing activity, is kind of like your hook, and notice I did use some alliteration happening in there. This next sentence is going to be your topic sentence, and it's basically a situation stance. It's giving you the topic, teenagers doing research, and your stance is that you have to master several skills. And then throughout your educational career, you'll be asked to do several research essays is kind of some background information. And this last and final one is your preview sentence to kind of piggyback on some of the information we learned in last night's video on how to write an intro. So as we look at this conclusion, you'll see a lot of similar things. This first, the first one, writing a research paper can be a simple process for young adults, is kind of restating your topic, and one that you'll be required to do again and again is similar to the highlighted piece up above that you can still see on the screen. And then this last section is a rewording of your preview sentence, so it's the summary or the highlight of the important information covered in your essay. So you can see that it's a very similar, it's just rearranged and put into different words. Very similar in how people try to fool teachers when they borrow a friend's paper and copy down the information exactly from the friend's paper, but just change a few of the words. It's just like that. Just think of that process when you're doing your conclusion. It's like you're copying a friend's paper, you're just changing the words around so it's not exactly the same. Okay, that's it for tonight. Nice and short. So don't forget to go back to your Whisk notes, whether it's a packet tonight or we're still doing it on notebook paper, and write a summary and a question, and we'll see it tomorrow. Thanks, guys.